If you have celiac disease and you feel like you are always hungry or constantly hungry or extremely hungry, this video is for you because I'm going to explain why this happens and what you can do about it. If you're new here, hi, my name is Taylor. I'm a registered dietitian specializing in celiac and fellow celiac of 10 plus years. And I don't know about you, but when I get glutened, one of the times that I feel extreme hunger is after that. Like when I get glutened, I want to eat the entire kitchen, and there's a reason why that might happen, and I'm going to explain that to you, and also why, in general, you might feel extremely hungry after getting diagnosed with celiac disease. Let's talk about it. So number one, damage from gluten can cause a disruption in the regulation of your hunger and fullness cues with celiac disease. Because of that, you might feel like you're extremely hungry after a celiac diagnosis, and typically with this, if you're healing and you're properly avoiding gluten and cross contact, this should normalize over time as you're living gluten-free and recovering your small intestine. However, if it's not, that doesn't mean that you're not healing, but it may mean that you need some extra attention in how you're staying gluten-free and avoiding cross contact just in case gluten still is getting in. Or it may mean that you need to take some additional steps in your eating habits to reestablish a normalization with your hunger and fullness cues. It just depends, and if you're thinking that this is what's happening, I would highly recommend you work with a celiac specialized dietitian to get to the bottom of this. But that's the first reason. You may have unregulated hunger and fullness cues, and unregulated, by that I mean dysregulated hunger and fullness cues. And that may be causing you to feel constantly or extremely hungry with celiac disease. The second reason is that if you were recently diagnosed within the past couple of years to the past 3 to 6 months, then your body may be actively trying to renourish itself after a period of malnutrition or malabsorption. So with celiac disease, I know you're familiar, that damage impacts your ability to access nutrients. And with that, depending on how long that occurred for, or depending on how depleted you are nutritionally, your body may be trying to renourish itself. And the best way it knows how to do that is to tell you it's hungry and to go eat some food so that it can pull the nutrients out of your food and put it back into storage or put it back into circulation in your body so you're no longer depleted. So if you're always hungry, or you're constantly hungry, especially if you were recently diagnosed and you're still healing, you're still learning to go gluten-free and avoid cross contact, your body might just be in a period of renourishment, and that could be what is happening here. Let me know if that sounds like that might be what's going on for you in the comment section down below. Another reason why you might feel like you're constantly hungry with celiac disease is because you are still learning how to balance a gluten-free diet. And so with that, maybe there are some macronutrients that are imbalanced. Maybe there are some micronutrients that are imbalanced. Something's happening here where you're not getting exactly what your body is asking for or needs. And so your body is trying to tell you it's missing something by telling you it's hungry. It might also be giving you a few hints on what it could be missing via cravings. Sometimes there is a natural intuitiveness to this, I've noticed with clients. But if you're constantly feeling hungry and you haven't spent time learning how to balance a gluten-free diet, it could be because you're missing something in your diet and it's imbalanced. And with that, I do want to acknowledge that learning to avoid gluten and cross contact are massive life-changing skills in their own right. They require a lot of work, a lot of energy to master, and balancing a gluten-free diet can feel like the straw that broke the camel's back. That's not my favorite saying, but that's what's coming to mind here. So I do want to say that if we're talking about and looking at priorities, I would say making sure you're avoiding gluten and cross contact first so that your gut can heal and hunger and fullness hormones can regulate or have a chance to regulate is priority. And then looking at and balancing a gluten-free diet would be second. However, depending on what the imbalance is, or depending on if you're able to access a dietitian, that might be something they could quickly attune to and let you know, like, oh, by the way, you're constantly feeling hungry. I noticed maybe your diet is a little bit lower in fat, or maybe you aren't eating enough fiber, or whatever it is that might be contributing to that constant hungry feeling. Something else that I do not ever see talked about when it comes to celiac disease and constant hunger is that with celiac disease, there are a lot of restrictions put onto us by living gluten-free. So we find ourselves in a lot of situations where we may feel deprived, we may feel restricted, and because of that, it can lead us to be thrown into a almost binge restrict cycle. Hear me out. I'm not saying you're binging and I'm not saying you're in that cycle or anything like that, but In nutrition and dietetics, there is what's known as a binge and restrict cycle, where essentially, if you are restricted, whether you are doing it or it's something else put onto you, when you are restricted, it can lead to a buildup of deprivation, a buildup of like seeking behavior, especially with food, and that can lead to a binge. And then with that binge, there could potentially be another buildup of restriction, and it leads to a cycle. And so with that, I find like I see this happen a lot, especially with like, let's say you go to a party and you brought, I don't know, so let's say you brought chips to eat while you were at that party so that you felt included and you still had something to eat, but also like, you weren't putting all of the burden on your host to include you. But at the party, someone else brought cupcakes and everyone's eating cupcakes, and you find yourself like, oh man, I really wish I had those cupcakes. That could then lead you to feel restricted. And then maybe when you get home, you end up eating a bunch of the gluten-free desserts in your cabinet. That's kind of that binge restrict cycle that I'm talking about here. Or maybe the next time you are around gluten-free cupcakes, you find you eat 4 of them and you have a horrible stomachache, and you don't even like cupcakes that much. So why did you eat 4 of them? It doesn't make sense. I hope that the breakdown of the binge restrict cycle here helped that make a little bit more sense. And with that, making sure that you've got strong coping strategies for managing a gluten-free diet and making sure you know how to avoid gluten and cross contact, and you also have the foresight to plan to not feel restricted is really, really helpful with this. But this also can explain why you might feel extremely hungry at times or constantly hungry with celiac disease. If you're constantly feeling deprived or you're constantly feeling restricted, that could be potentially playing a role. And spending time trying to make sure that you're doing things so you don't feel deprived and restricted can be helpful. And if you need help, a celiac specialized dietitian who is familiar with binge restrict cycles and the relationships with food can really, really be helpful. So that's that. And now I want to get into another reason why you might constantly or feel extremely hungry with celiac disease. And that is you're not eating enough, period. And this is something that can get a little tricky with people with celiac disease. And there's a lot of things that could be complicating this. But if you're feeling constantly hungry, like you feel like you're just always hungry, you eat something, you feel hungry again, you eat something, you feel hungry again, you may not be eating enough. And that's why your body keeps telling you it's hungry, because you're not getting enough food. So that is something that you may want to explore. It's a tricky place to balance and to explore in nutrition. So if you want some guided help, again, a celiac specialized dietitian who's really well versed in celiac and also relationships to food can really help you dissect what's happening here and how to make sure you're eating enough without eating too much, because there is that fear of people overeating, and it's complicated. There's a lot of work to be done there, and it's often way oversimplified on the internet. So that could be also why you're feeling constantly hungry or extremely hungry. And that last reason is you were exposed to gluten. Now, there's a lot of potential theories behind why when you're exposed to gluten, you feel constantly hungry. For example, if you are someone who, when you get exposed to gluten, have an immediate, somewhat urgent evacuation a couple hours later, you may feel really extremely hungry afterwards, because did you absorb anything from the meal that glutened you? I don't know. Or if you have been glutened and you're feeling like you're being exhausted by dealing with all these symptoms, that constant hunger could be showing up to try to help you, give you the energy your body needs to recover and recoup. There's a lot going on there when you get glutened and experience that extreme or constant hunger. All I personally really need to know is that I'm experiencing it and that I need to honor that and make sure I'm taking steps to manage it. So those are the reasons why you might feel extremely or constantly hungry, with some ways to potentially manage it. If you found this video helpful, informative, or just overall entertaining, please give it a big thumbs up. If you want more content like this from a fellow celiac specialized registered dietitian, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And again, I've got free resources. So if you have celiac and no one has sat you down and taught you how to read a food label, I've got a totally free label reading class in the description box down below that'll help you make sure that the food that you're eating is gluten-free, and that getting glutened or constantly still getting exposed to gluten isn't contributing to your constant hunger. If you're interested in that, that's linked down below. There's some other resources down below if you need support, if you need to find a provider near you, or if you can't find a provider near you, I've got some self-paced courses that walk you through what you need to know in order to avoid gluten and cross contact or balance a gluten-free diet. All of those resources are in the description box. All of that said, again, my name's Taylor, celiac and celiac specialized registered dietitian, and I will see you when I see you.